Now coming to tonight's sessions on transforming enterprises across process, people, and technology. Let me give you an introduction to our very distinguished eminent speaker, Mr. Anand Raghavan. With a career spanning over 25 plus years in the IT industry and backed by a strong strategy and execution record, Mr. Raghavan has played key roles in areas of delivery management, strategy, operation management, and enterprise IT. As the Vice President and Senior Delivery Manager in Infosys IT, he was part of the core team at the Infosys, transforming and setting the stage for a truly digital Infosys by reimagining the company across the dimensions of experience, process, and technology. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Raghavan. We are absolutely delighted to have you here with us tonight. You can switch on the video.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's my pleasure, Shama.
I'm handing the session over to you, sir. You can share your screen now.
I can't turn on my video. You can just help me with that.
Just a moment. We will fix that.
Yeah. So
yes,
can you see me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Shama. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody who's on the call. It's a great pleasure for me to talk to you guys for the next 30-35 minutes about transforming the enterprise. So let me take a minute to share my screen and then we'll start off. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, sir. If you could just make the presentation full screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, okay. Mr. Raghavan, I can see your screen.
Okay, so we'll be talking today about transforming the enterprise. Okay, great. So I think the topic for today is transforming the enterprise, and I'll walk you through my in large organizations over the last 25 years of, and I'll walk you through my views on this, and then we'll open it up for an interactive Q&A session from all you folks. So if you look at what's happened over the last 100+ years, right? There are various waves of business model evolutions that have happened, and enterprise have been constantly adapting changes. The early years was more mass production basis. The globalization started picking up. Then the distribution and marketing started picking up, and the distribution centers and the manufacturing centers started moving to offshore centers across the globe because they provided low-cost production. So that the design happened at the enterprise, but the production happened at the offshore centers or distributed centers, and then the marketing was handled by the main company. And then in the 90s up to 2010 is when the internet revolution changed the world, right? Now you could do everything over the internet. You could connect businesses together. Businesses could be interconnected together. So the business models of enterprises changed of how they would interact. Earlier, it was predominantly offline, but now there's a lot of data flowing between enterprises. Then comes the years of how data became the fundamental driver of enterprises. Without data, you would not be able to make inferences of what is happening within the organization, which processes are working well, which processes are not working well. Otherwise, it was an elaborate process for organizations to understand and get feedback from customers. Now, with internet coming into play, with feedbacks happening online, real time, enterprises could react much more easily and faster to what's happening to its products and services. So the the data became very critical in after 2010 when the integration happened with between enterprises. And moving forward, I think we all know that AI is going to drive this completely and going to change the way enterprises are going to shape themselves in the new world, right? But enterprises have been adopting, right, from being uh, so having centers in their own countries to distributed centers to using the internet to using data and now using AI. So enterprises have been evolving over time. But the interesting part to see is if you look at the last 50, 60 years, the average age of enterprises have been which are part of the S&P index. That means their earning revenues are being tracked by the various indices by various companies is falling dramatically. And well, it was 33 years around 1965. The expectation is that the average age of an organization will be about 14 years in the next 3-4 years, right? And the interesting trend for this is that it's very difficult. The adoption of your business models have to be very quick. Otherwise, you will start losing revenue share. You'll start losing market share. There'll be new entrants coming into the play, and they'll take over your business, your market, your customers, right? And that's why if you see where have these companies gone, 55% of them have got merged to other large organizations, or multiple organizations have merged themselves and they vanished in their true form, but they become a new organization or part of a larger organization. One-third of these organizations changes that are happening in the world, and a few others have either reduced their revenues and not being tracked anymore. So, but the key message here is that if enterprises are not ready to transform themselves, they will cease to exist, right? You keep hearing the keyword of perform or perish that's being used. So the data here very clearly shows that only few organizations really perform and succeed, but the rest move into. If you see this graph, almost 88% of the organizations don't exist anymore that were there in the early years. So let's first start looking at what is an enterprise. An enterprise has multiple touch points that they need to handle. Their employees, the customers, there's different stakeholders, the investors who are there as part of the organization, hoping for it to grow and generate returns and value to themselves and to the organization. The suppliers, partners, ecosystems that you have that help you grow as an organization, communities that you serve, media and analysts who give good or bad reviews about you, what's happening on the legal and regulatory world of how well you're doing if you're a global organization in terms of understanding what the legal and regulatory requirements are in various countries, right? And the overall industry, because you have to exist in an ecosystem and not survive as an individual itself. So there are many stakeholders that many people that come into play for an enterprise. And an enterprise has to handle all of these entities that exist around to be successful, right? So I think the key is how is an enterprise handling all of this, and then we will dive into in terms of how this is done through different mechanisms. So if you look at what's happened over the last few years, right? They were all, if you look at companies like Blockbuster or the music industry that we have grown with, or retailers, the brick and mortar retailer companies that we're going, all of them were doing very well. But the new age digital companies came in with a completely new disruptive models, leveraging technology, focusing on the customer, and they just changed the way, because companies were not able to adopt. And here are a few examples of why some large companies just vanished out of that 82% or 87% that we were talking about, right, from the face of the earth, is because these new companies like Netflix, Uber, Apple brought in new technology, completely digital, were completely customer centric, and and we're able to bring in completely new ways of doing the same business, right? Uh, and they build ecosystems to make themselves larger, and those ecosystems thrived on this completely, right? A great example is how Apple killed the music industry. Earlier, you would just go, you had to buy full albums, right? You had, even if you want to listen to one song, you had to buy the entire album consisting of 10, 12, 15, whatever songs, and you paid for that album. But Apple changed that completely and started selling you songs. That was the need of the consumer, but these music industries did not want to listen to the voice of the consumer, and was not providing that opportunity. Apple sees that and just change that and kill. And now, most of it is all, or 95% or 99% of the music is digital. Like, very few of us would, go back to our cassettes and our DVDs to listen to our music, right? So it's key for companies to understand this aspect of it, that you have to look out for what's changing outside your places and change your internal processes and structures and models to make this happen, right? So another example of what we're all been living through over the last 6 months of what's happening through the pandemic, right? And you see across the various sectors that we are talking about, right? Uh, if you look, I mean, the examples are there. I'll touch upon a few of them. E-commerce is a great change that happened in 3 months. Amazon just announced that they saw 10 years worth of growth in 3 months because of people all forcing themselves to be sitting at home and ordering online because they could not visit stores. Similarly, Netflix, Disney, all of them started multifold increase in users, right? So if these, the key thing that I'm saying is that if these enterprises had not envisaged these changes and changed themselves as an organization, both from a technology and a process perspective, and the people who are driving this completely, they would not have been able to cater to the demand that happened in 10x, 100x capacities, right? Another great example is most of the IT industry, or 99%, 100% of the industry started working from home. So you needed new tools, and that is where Zoom, while it was playing a key role, suddenly started a sea of growth. I mean, if you're a person who's running a company, these numbers are like golden. This is what you are expecting, or you built your companies for, right? To have 200 million customers. But if that happened in 3 months, then is your infrastructure ready to handle it, right? Like, we're having the session, and now you can't have continuous, drop in connectivity, or people are not able to connect, or hundreds of people are not able to, continuously view these webinars that are happening, right? If the technology that they had used and the process that they're using and making it easy for the users if it is not simple, people would not have used it. So across industries, you see whoever has been able to transform themselves is performing great, and whoever is not able to do it is vanishing. And you hear stories of companies vanishing, right? The latest I heard or I read about was this gaming company that we all go to malls and play entertainment games around it, right? The company was doing great, but it was a completely brick and mortar, right? The expectation was people had to go to the physical location to do it. They were doing great. The revenues, the growth rates were over the last 3-4 years about 30-40% year-on-year revenues. Uh, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, they announced that they're shutting down all the centers because they're not able to sustain it, and they don't know how long malls will be closed, or people will not come to, even if the malls are open, to these gaming centers and gaming arcades. So if you're not ready for this change, then you will suddenly start finding it difficult to sustain in this new world. So the key here is you have to change your mindset for an organization, right? Just by looking at profit is not necessary. You have to look, what is the purpose that I'm serving? I mean, are you true to the purpose that you started your organization for, and not just looking at profits? You might have times where you may not earn revenues, but is your purpose still valid? still being met? Is their purpose to serve the customer or just to make money? So organizations have to start looking at what the change in mindset because COVID is there today, but tomorrow it could be something else that is coming in. So these disruptions that are happening, or what you call black swan events, might happen more frequently. While the virus happened maybe after 100 years, there could be other black swan events that can happen much more faster. So as an organization, are you ready to, or are you transforming yourself already, or you started to think about it, right, across various aspects of it, uh, from controlling to empowering your employees, right? Earlier, you expected everybody to come and sit in the office, and so you knew what people were doing. In the new distributed world, you have to have the trust with your employee to him or her, right? And so that's the fundamental change. If companies are not ready to make that transformation, then they're going to get towards that 32%, or they're going to get taken over by somebody else who's already doing it well. So the key is you have to change your mindset as an organization as a whole, to make this transition happen, and that transition has to happen very quickly. So let's touch upon some of the aspects of how you will do it, right? I think the key fundamentally is, if you've still not done it, put your customer at the center of everything, right? The top part of the slide is any process that you have for your organization. It could be internal processes or external processes, customer facing processes. It could be processes for your HR, for your procurement, for your CRM, anything. Start looking at waste in those processes. So start looking at, are there things that I can eliminate in this process that are not needed anymore? If you can't eliminate it, if there are many manual activities still happening, can you automate many of those activities, right? So that the process becomes more efficient, more quicker, removes multiple steps, makes the user much more happier. Next step is, can you re-engineer to make it much more agile, much more accessible, right? Maybe your process is completely run on premise. Can you move it to the cloud so that you can leverage the distribution technologies to be more closer to your customer, rather than having those latencies in your applications, or whatever service that you're offering, or whatever product that you're offering? If you can't do all of those because it's very legacy in terms of a process, you have to then reimagine it, completely relook at, throw away your existing process, relook at how can I do this differently, right? Uh, a great example is how travel applications used to work within an enterprise, right? Every company would build their respective travel applications to connect to their internal cost management play. Companies are completely migrating to leverage Uber and Ola to do its travel part of it, and similarly using another SaaS product for its expense part of it. So you have to reimagine how your process is going to work in the future, right? If you can't, let's say, buy an off-the-shelf product to use it, then the best way to do it is then use the design thinking philosophy to relook at your entire process and say, what do I need to do it? Because design thinking as a methodology puts the customer in the center, right? So it has various aspects of, you have to first understand what the problem is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, who's the customer, is it and define your use cases around it. Then it gives you an opportunity to ideate, saying, is this the way to do it? Quickly prototype it, get the feedback from it, go back to your definition or a real re-understanding of your problem statement, and then go about actually building your service or your product and to implementation, and then you iterate this on a continuous basis. The advantage is as you now move into your new methodologies of Agile and Scrum, design thinking fits very quickly to it, because Agile offers you the execution methodology of doing it and iteratively, and you can use this design thinking process to help you achieve that. So you don't need to think through your entire process or entire product in an end-to-end perspective, right? You can start with your MVP and then start identifying your feature sets, and then slowly add on to it as you go through iteratively. So, so any process that you have within your organization, internal, external, vendor process, by using these through simple techniques, you will be able to relook at and help you transform your organization, right? It could be the way you're onboarding, right? I mean, I know many organizations right now have moved to a completely digital onboarding because nobody can go to their campuses or to their offices building, but you still need to hire new employees, right? So that's about reimagining the way you're doing your entire onboarding part of it, and it's more completely digital. So people, earlier you had to take your records and show it to your HR person or whoever is walking through it. Now they organizations are looking at how you can just upload your documents into a digital format, and then somebody will look through it, or even interface with colleges through a digital infrastructure, through APIs, to get the information directly from them or from anybody else. So you have to relook at how this entire aspect happens, so that you can get your process working very efficiently and putting the user in the center. And you can even, because by doing this, you can crunch the time that it takes to run. Earlier on onboarding, that would happen about a couple of weeks, but can now done in a couple of hours, right? So it's a great uh, uh, customer confidence building or experience that you're changing for your employee, right? So 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 the process aspect of it, right? By using these two techniques, you can relook at any process that you want and redo it. But in a large organization, it will be a challenge, and this conversation needs to happen from the top, from the CEO, from the board, to drive this change. It cannot be done at the IT level, or it cannot be done at the business team level. It has to be a collaborative effort at an organization level to make this change. Then the next part that you have to look at is the employee, right? And you will see that there are and this holds good both for your as a consumer, or a customer, or an employee, depending on what your service or product is, right? You have at least come down to about 4, and then the 5th generation, what we call the alpha generation, will join the organization in the next couple of years. But let's look at these 3 organizations right now, right? Or these 3 types of people or sets of people, right? And if you see between the millennials who were born between the 80 and 95, the Generation Z who are already in the organization, and the alpha is going to come, their expectations are changing differently. And here are some examples that I'm saying of what their expectations, and all of you can relate to this, because you would be in one of these, most probably in the millennial or in the Gen Z perspective. But your kids, you will be seeing, if you have kids who are already in the alpha category, right? So basically, what would they be doing, right? So if you look at the millennials, people like me, or maybe I'm not even a millennial, I'm like one level before the millennial, right? From my age perspective, all of us wanted possession of everything that we wanted, right? We needed a car, whatever it is, we wanted to buy and keep it ourselves and own it to its end of life. But the Gen Z is completely different, right? They're okay not buying and keeping it to themselves. They're opening to renting stuff, right? They rent cars, they rent houses, they rent phones. Many things are going into a rental mode. But the next generation might not even rent. They might just use it from a sharing perspective, because that's how the technologies have evolved underneath to enable that to happen. So the set of people that are coming in are completely different. So are your process catering to these different attributes of employees or customers that you are servicing them with your products or services, right? Is the key that you have to watch out for, right? And that's a key for an organization. One is look at it both from an employee and a customer. Is my process changing? Is taking care of this new generation of employees of the future? If it is not, what do I need to start doing and changing now to take them into my organization in the near future? And many of the Gen Zs and Gen Alpha, that is a very thin line between these. So they're already exhibiting the attributes of Gen Alpha already, right? So many of the renting capabilities, they're moving into a sharing expectation. They're looking at instant gratification for many of the things that they do. They don't want to wait for 5 years to get a role change, right? They're looking at what is the reward mechanism I can expect from an organization after I complete my sprint in the next 1 month. Not wait for the end of the project, which could take about 6 months or 1 year or 2 years to take. So how is your compensation processes? How is your reward and mechanisms changing in your organization to cater to this set of an employee, right? So it's completely different, which you have to think through completely. And to change your process, first you have to understand who your customer is, right? Or who your employees. So put them at the center and then build your process around them. The next aspect, and this is very wonderfully depicted by Dick Bolls as a three boxes of life perspective. The earlier generation of people would do what's happening on the left side, right? You first do your education, 20, 25 years, then you work for 25 years, and then you retire for the next whatever period of time you live. So it was a clear demarcation of the different aspects of your life, right? You do your education first, do you do your work on base of education, and then you retire and enjoy life. But again, if you look at the millennials or the alphas, they're looking at it completely differently, right? They're looking at doing all of these together. Can I do some education? Can I work, earn some money? Can I use that money to do some leisure, go see the world, come back, do my education, do work again? So how is your organization now adapting to such people, right? Because they'll not be there for a long term. You can't expect them to be there for 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years in an organization. They might maximum spend a year, 2 years with you, and then want to take a next 6 months, 1 year off, seeing the world, and then come back and work again. So how are you handling such? They might want to come back and work with you again, right? So how are you going to handle such things? How is your talent management process going to change with this, right? Now we're talking about the gig economy where people are uh, freelancers with specific skill sets who work maybe on specific projects or parts of projects, not even work on complete project life cycle, right? So how are you going to leverage them? 40% the one of the surveys says that about 40% of US is already working in a freelance mode, and it's going to only increase with and the push that is happening through the change that is happening now. More and more people are going to get into freelancing mode or a gig world, right? It's happening. You already saw the gig economy in the blue collar job, right? In your Swiggies and your Ubers and your Olas and the Dunzos kinds of businesses that are happening, but it'll start happening in the white collar job that we will start seeing within India and around the world, right? India is slowly starting to pick up on the gig economy, and this model helps them, right? Because then people are able to do it, at much more at their uh, leisure and the way they want to do it, rather than being stuck in this three box method of the old generation. So the employee is coming back to an employee within an organization, right? Is changing, right? Again, nobody wants to work now 9 to 5. Maybe they want to work anytime, anywhere. Uh, right? I've heard people who are saying I'm working from Bali and then moving on to another location and working from there. Right? I'm working from night 10 to morning 5, not working in the morning. So how do you work with these employees? How will your team work? How will your projects work when you are such a different kind of an employee? Now people are saying earlier, if you see, people would go to organizations because the infrastructure provided to the organizations was much better than the infrastructure you had at home or you had or what you own. But it's not the case anymore. The devices that people have in their hand is much more powerful and better than some of the equipment that you get when you go and work in an office environment. So they're saying, I'll work with my device. I don't want to work with the office device. So how do you handle the security aspects of this, right? Where people are using their own personal devices, but you have to secure the organizational content and data and customer data. So the employee, in short, the employee is changing, and the last part of it is that they want to create their own order. They don't want to stay in an organization and spend 10 years, right? They want to start as an expert on day one in one area and then move on to become an expert in another area. But the the ladder that exists within organizations today expect the employee to move from one role to another, one level to another, and become expert in specific areas. Right now, here you're getting people who want to, dirty their hands in multiple aspects of it. So how do you handle such an employee? How is your process handling? How is your performance management changing? How is your career modeling changing in your organization? So all of these needs to be done along with handling the customer, the aspects around what's happening in the outside world too, right? Your inside world is also changing. The people inside your organization are different now. So, and if you come to the technology aspect of it, I think the acceleration is this figure, the picture says it all, right? Uh, an airplane in its, or the car or a telephone, you look at the years that it took from design to actually seeing or reaching 50 million users, and look at the bottom line where uh, Pokemon Go hit 50 million users in 19 days, and you'll not be surprised that tomorrow, aided by new technologies, new services and products are becoming 50 million on day one, right? Or in a few hours of its launch. So how so the technology is changing very rapidly, so people will adapt very, very quickly to whatever you throw using these new technologies. They will also not go away from it. If you look at all of you look at your mobile phone, you will have maybe close to 50, 80, 100 apps on your phone. But a user on an average, a maximum uses about 10 apps on that phone at any uh, in the lifetime of on that phone. The other apps are not going to be used at all. You just install it because somebody told you it was good. You saw it somewhere, and then it's just lying there, hoping that you will use it later, but you'll never get to use it, right? So so it's the customer is if you are the customer, then those 10 apps are the only one that you're comfortable with. People have to fight to become the top 10 for you, right? And for each person it is different. So as if you're designing or a product from that perspective, how do you design such a product, right, where the adoption rate is the speed is so fast, the technologies that you have to use, where do you service that or where do you surface that application, right? Is it on the mobile? Is it on a desktop? Is it on another device? Is it on a wearable? Is it on the car? Where do you surface that application or the service that you want to uh, give to the customer or the employee, right? So you have to think through this aspect of it, because the underlying technologies are changing, and the speed of adoption of these is also changing. And every year, if you look at the hype cycles that Gartner or Forrester or any of these people put in, just changing completely. They're going more deep dive. If you are talking about AI being the one that is changing on the right side on the hype cycle, you will see different forms of AI, right? You will see responsible AI or embedded AI or explainable AI, right? And so what does these mean? So how do we use this in my service, in my process? Is it beneficial for me? So people have to now become much more deep or dual skilled or multi skilled in multiple aspects of it, right? You must understand the business aspect, you must understand the technology aspect, you must understand how to leverage the technology for the business that you're building in, and that's when you will be able to add value to your customer, to the work that you're doing. So the technology also is coming in and changing, and every day you're hearing about new things, but the old one is what you're still using. So you have to make that call. Should I transition myself from the old to the new, or continue on my old one? Because the technologies also go through the same cycle that we saw for our businesses, right? But maybe they're the, the duration for which they last will be much more longer. Some of them will be much more long lasting, but they will change at a speed, and they will change now as we move forward in a much faster pace. So coming back, if you have to put all of this together, right? You have to move from where you are today to the future, and it has to cut across all people, the technology, the culture, the rewards, the physical assets that you have for people, the way the managers behave and operate, the way the careers are designed, the jobs and roles are designed, the way teams operate. How do you put together a team, right? Earlier, you would create a team and that team would exist over time. But if you're talking about a gig economy where people are coming to do specific tasks, then these teams are like, you have to assemble the teams like a factory model, right? Very quickly put them together, they deliver it, and the next team comes over, takes it over and moves forward. So how do you make sure that the information is transitioned from one to another? How do you bring in these collaborative tools into play to make that happen, right? So all of these have to change for an organization to transition. And you will see in your own organizations that not all of them are being done at the same time, right? Many of these aspects are being done. You will notice a lag. Well, maybe the team aspect is moving, but the organization structure has not changed, right? People are still very hierarchical, but the teams are in an atomic basis. And then you spend a lot of time in reporting information the hierarchical way, right? There is no independence, there is no accountability at the team level, but it's more that the information has to flow up the organization. So you'll have to move. If the organization structure does not move, then the organization is not transforming itself, right? It's doing it in bits and pieces, but not as a whole, because it cannot generate the value that the new structure would give them. So in summary, right, if you are really transforming the enterprise, you have to do it across these three dimensions, leveraging what we heard, right? The people, the technology, the process, because an intersection of all of these, it gives you different things. When you're transforming people and processes, you get scale, right? Because people are learning new things, the processes are much easier to use, so you're able to grow faster. If you use technology for that, you can automate, and if people use those technology well, they can innovate. And when all of these three happen together is when the real transformation of an organization happens, and you're able to achieve those numbers that we talked about, right? And sometimes you can be aided by external forces that come and help you, but most of the times it will be what you do that will make it happen, right? Because and most of these organizations, the new digital organizations that you see, are there's a very thin line between sales, marketing, delivery, right? Netflix, can you tell me who is the salesperson of Netflix who sold Netflix to you? No, nobody, right? You heard it from somebody, you heard it from a friend, you heard it from a family member, you went, downloaded the app, or went to the web, registered yourself, you didn't go through any problems. The user experience is great. And it's completely self-servicing, right? You go look for what you want. It's leveraging technology because it's suggesting to you movies that your friends watch, other people are watching. It gives you ratings of which movies are good or which shows are good, what to watch. So technology is being leveraged in its peak by the people who are building it, right? And the process is very simple, self learning, very the user experience it's top notch. It never fails, it never stops, right? Many of the things that you can look at things that you yourself build, and I'm not demeaning anybody, but compare it with some of these products that you use, right? Many of these never fail, right? Many of our products that we build and many of the products I've built over my time, spend a lot of time fixing bugs, fixing, getting them to up and work to scale up, right? But now these new digital companies work in a completely different model. So you'll always be wondering, how is it that all these products work without any problem? That's because they're using this model that we see, right? They've transformed, they're hiring the best, they're using the right set of people, uh, are using the right set of technologies, and their processes are simple. So all of this, when you put together, is when you get to transform the enterprise. So that's my few minutes of conversation with you folks. And then now I think maybe we'll open it up for uh, Q&A. So over to you, Shama. How do we want to do this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Raghavan. This was a really great session. I mean, such relatable examples, even I could relate to the whole subject coming from a non-technical background. So we have your questions, Mr. Raghavan, if you could see in the Q&A section.
Yeah, maybe I'll just stop my screen screening and
Okay, okay.
go in there. Okay, Q&A.
Q&A section, if you can find it, it's okay. Otherwise, I'll read it out to you. It's from
Yeah, I can
Mahendra.
see. Yeah, on your earlier point on employee
Right.
aspiration to be an all-rounder, to learn all and be all is not new in tech domain, right? Yeah, it's not new. It's not something new, but I think the key is about figuring out what do you need to learn today versus what you need to learn tomorrow, right? Earlier, the way you would learn is you had to go to a college, attend a course, learn through it. The time you would take to learn that would be much more longer. But with new ways of learning, what you call bite-sized learnings that you can do, you can learn on the job. So you're able to do your job as well as learn on the part. So in that Dick Bolls model that you saw, right? So you're on the right side where you're learning the education part that we talked about. You're using it for work. You again go back and learning and then using it for work rather than doing all your education first and doing and then doing your work, right? So you're doing on a continuous basis, and it also gives you opportunities to switch from one domain to another, one technology to another. That's where an all-rounder comes into play, right? So today, maybe you're good at AI. Tomorrow, you need to be, maybe your business needs you to learn AR and augmented reality or virtual reality, and you'll have to switch over to that. And you take the learnings from here to learn the new technologies. As long as you have that appetite to learn something new, uh, you can be an all-rounder and also be an expert in some spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Raghavan. There's a small note for the audience. Please go ahead and ask your questions to Mr. Raghavan. Let's make the best out of this session. While having said that, so we have another question from the LinkedIn thread from Aditya. So he wants to know, existing in the digital ecosystem, like transforming from the old ways to the new digital ways, what was the biggest challenge that Infosys had to face digitalizing?
Yeah, I think the key, as I said, right, the key about any transformation, it needs to come from the top. As long as the board, the CEOs are very clear that this transformation needs to happen, things will happen at a very fast pace. If the changes are coming bottom up, then it will take a lot more time to get that happen, to make that happen, because you have to work your way the hierarchy to convince people on why that change is needed to get that. So what is the culture of your organization? Is your organization ready to learn, ready to change? Is very key. If your organization is learning on a continuous basis, you can make out from the places that you work in, right? If you give a feedback, how quickly is that feedback being implemented in your organization? That gives you a good metric to tell you if your organization is a learning organization, right? And you see that change yourself, right? Or maybe they'll call you to say, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't you be part of the change or make that change in the organization? Then you know the organization is learning, it's collaborative, it's opening it up, it's being more transparent. That means it is transforming itself, right? But if the organization says thank you, I'll get back to you, and you don't see anything happen, then you know it's still stuck in its old hierarchical method earlier, where it needs to have the control in a more centralized way and not distributed way.
Great, great, Mr. Raghavan. We have another question in the Q&A section, if you could see, from Arvind Sharma.
Yeah. So Arvind Sharma says, how do we work with the newcomers of new generations? The working model and style is different, and we from 1980 need to pace with them and with their working style. We need to also manage them. What are your recommendations to work with them in a mutual understanding work environment? Yeah, I mean, Great question. I think especially people who are in that Gen X, the earlier generations, right? I think the best way, if you have kids, is to start seeing what they do, right? And even I think even before this session, that happened to me. I had some trouble on the technology side. Uh, so my daughter came in, showed me how to do. She found out that my iPad did not have a share screen for whatever reason. She immediately brought her iPad and say, "Use this," and start using it. So it's all about, you have to be open and you have to learn. You have to get ready to listen to the other side, rather than, I think the older generation is more used to talking and not listening so much. I think the newer generation wants to be heard much more. So if you can start developing the skill of listening and hearing what they want to say and have that conversation with them, I think they are ready to have a conversation, and they are very willing to accept your point of view as long as their point of view is heard, right? I think we people from the 90s are more saying "do it my way" kind of thing, right? And they'll show us the highway. So it's important for us to listen to them and hear them and talk to them, and then the working style will become much more easier with such people. Do you see the research-oriented work growing in India? How do you see the impatient, trigger-ready alpha generation coping with this
I'll read out the
passion-centric
question for the
technology?
audience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sandeep asks us, do you see the research-oriented work growing in India? How do you see the impatient, trigger-ready alpha generation coping with this passion-centric area?
Yeah, see the research. I think the research area is growing big. There's a lot of new investments coming in, and if you look at the startup ecosystem that's flourishing in India, that's where all the research is really happening, right? Uh, the big companies are also doing research, but the amount of research that is happening in the startup world is huge, and that is where I think you see a lot of the millennials and the alpha generation is moving towards. That means they're ready for that kind of work, and I don't think they're impatient. It's just that their style is different. They are more instant. They need instant gratification, as I said earlier, right? So we have to figure out how do you give that to them, right? In this, when you are when they're working even in the research aspects of it, can you break the research into a smaller aspect of it so that they can start building that passion, and then you will see them delivering on it. And if you see the way they are moving towards, I think the new generation is all completely moving. And if the alpha generation will be completely gig and self, or from a set of people who will not really work in large organizations, right? They will be from the gig economy. A big chunk of them will be from the gig. They'll be the self-entrepreneurs. They'll be running small companies of their own, or they will come do work. They'll have expertise and move away. So you have to see how you can leverage their expertise in a different way. But the research work is definitely growing in India, and with all the efforts even from the government to push research happening, I think it's only going to grow multifold.
Great, Mr. Raghavan. We have a lot of our audience is asking questions. This indeed was a great session. We have another one from Shafiq Abdul. I don't know if you can see it. It's in the chat box. I will read it out to you, sir.
Oh, okay.
So he asks us, you are
Okay.
absolutely, you can read it?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So Shafiq says, you are absolutely right on the new generations where they seem to be restless and need to share life. My query is on the other perspective. How do we trigger an organization in transformation who are still in traditional way of management with very less interested in collaboration and trust to employees, especially regions like Saudi, Oman in GCC, Gulf countries?
Yeah, I think uh, they are changing. I think, at least from what I'm reading on the papers, the opening of what's happening, right? When you look at the country process also needs to change, right? I mean, example that I can relate to, it is Saudi opening up for driving for women, right? That's a change in process, right? It didn't exist earlier, right? For ages together. So if they have opened up, that means they are ready to change. They're that the new generation is pushing them for that change, right? So some changes have to happen because many of these companies, if I understand it well, are also governed by how the way the country operates, right? So if it's a more open country, the companies will start getting much more open. And so that change has to happen at the company. So the transformation is not an enterprise level transformation, it's a more a country level transformation, right? And you can see that transformation. I mean, if you look at India over the last few years, you're seeing that those transformations happening in a very, very big way. So similarly, I think these countries, when they start making this transition from the old type of country to a new type, it's just like transforming an enterprise, but at a much larger scale.
A quick note to the audience, we have Mr. Raghavan for another 5 minutes max. Actually, we are short of time. But meanwhile, please go ahead and ask your final questions to him. So there's another question in the Q&A section for you.
Yeah. So I'll read out the question.
Read it out?
Yeah, please.
Okay. With many markets getting impacted due to difficult times like COVID, what is your recommendation for all? In which direction do you see the IT company should concentrate to help the world get back business run better, and how we as individuals can influence?
Yeah, I think this is a time where IT industry, I think, was looking for its new push to, because if you look at the IT industry as a whole, right, they were all struggling. When I say struggling, that's settled down to a revenue growth cycle of 5 to 7 to 8% revenue, right, and they all of them doing almost very similar work. Now you will start seeing the companies start, they have to transform themselves, and many of these companies are doing it and changing, and you will see that because of the change you're seeing in the organization, the leadership is changing, the way they're handling their employees is changing completely, and many of these companies are completely transforming themselves and to look like, to be sustainable for the next 15, 20 years. And they're starting to focus on many of these problems, right? So if you will see many IT companies getting into different areas. Yeah, even in the context of India, right? I think today TCS announced something using they had their Ion platform, or a platform called Ion, which they're using for onboarding new employees. Now they opened it up for other companies to help them onboard employees digitally, right? So, and that's a change that they're bringing in, right? Many companies did not know how to onboard employees digitally, and TCS had a platform, so they're now giving it out to all the Indian companies, and all the Mahindra and Mahindras, the Tata companies, other Tata companies are all lapping up this new platform because all of them want to onboard employees digitally. So similarly, all of them will start identifying areas of opportunities in this new space, and building solutions, platforms, to make that happen. And as individuals, you will have to start saying, okay, where do I need to play here? What is my strength? What is my area of expertise, or what do I want to do? And then start looking at opportunities in those space, and start jumping in there. Because all of these new services, products are all being built in the platform method, on the cloud, right? So adding new features is much more easier now compared to the old. They're all using new technologies. So if you know how, in what technology the product is being built, and you have that expertise, and you have a new feature, a new idea that needs to go in, you can jump in very quickly and help that company add it to that product. It could be a new feature, entry into a new market, leverage something new technology, whatever it is, right? So bring your expertise there, and you'll definitely be able to contribute there.
Great, Mr. Raghavan. We will end the session with one more question, so we will not take more of your time. We are loving the interest that the audience is showing. I hope it's okay with you if we take two
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
minutes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we have Amit Singh asking us a very basic question actually, which all of us want to know. How do you connect customers on digital platform in today's world?
I think it's about how you design your product, right? If the example I gave of Netflix, right? Just imagine if you had to buy Netflix by the way you were buying earlier, where a sales guy would come and sell it in front of your house and or through emails or whatever it is, right? So now I think all the new way of acquiring customers is to go viral of your feature of your product, right? Uh, when I say viral, it's not that they don't attack the first set of customers, right? They do target marketing for looking at, they do the research on who the customers, what is the persona of those customers that they want, and then once they get it, then they start using them to go viral by sharing it with the people, giving them credits and benefits for sharing and passing on the information. And that's how, if you see, most of the new generation becomes popular, right? They go viral very, very quickly, right? Pokemon Go, nobody heard about it, but in 19 days 50 million users, right? How can that happen if they can't have a marketing plan for that, right? They can't have a sales plan for that. So but they still acquired 50 million customers. The same thing happened with Facebook and WhatsApp and everything else. So I think the key in the new digital era is to use these techniques, right? Of in the digital of going viral, giving rewards, giving leading people in by getting by friends bringing friends, by those mechanisms. And the new generation of millennial and are of that. If that is the generation that you want to attack, then it will work if you give them a good product, right? And if you give them a great service, if it is self-service, you don't need to ask questions. You can do it yourself. You will be able to get new customers. But every time if you have to do a phone call or a raise a request and talk to somebody to do something, then your feature is not working, your product is not working, because that's not the way to sell in a digital world.
So thank you, Mr. Raghavan. And with that, that's our last question, audience. Thank you so much for participating. So give me a moment here. Meanwhile, I'd request you to pick the best question and we'll declare the winner at the end of the session. So just give me a moment. You can see the questions in the Q&A and pick your best questions.
Okay. I think maybe you can go with the question from Arvind Sharma. How do we work with the newcomers of new generations?
Okay. Great. So we have Arvind Sharma as a winner for the digital learning course that he's going to receive from the Institute of Product Leadership. And thank you again so much for participating, audience. And Mr. Raghavan, we have absolutely enjoyed having you over here. It was a huge pleasure and a complete success of this session. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. Thank you so much for your time and sharing some amazing insights drawn from your experience and such relatable experience from the industry. So thank you again, once
Thank
again.
you.
So if you scan the
Thank you,
QR
Shaman.
code,
Thank you,
right, sir.
IPL, for giving me this opportunity. I'm very happy to share my experiences.
Complete pleasure, sir. It was an absolute pleasure from our side.